Welcome back to Call Time with Katie Birnbaum. Thank you so much for tuning in for the last few weeks. The response to my Christian Borle episode has been really amazing, but we are keeping that bar very high today with my guest, the wonderful actor, Eric R. Williams. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you.
How are you doing today? Let's do a little vibe check.
No, vibe check. 1, 2, 1, 2. Today, what's today? Today's Thursday. On this Thursday, despite the rain outside, I'm feeling very good.
That's good. Yeah,
Yeah.
you have like a nice energy. We talked a little bit before the interview, but you always have a good energy. So there you go.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, I haven't left the house in 2 days. But for those of you who may not know Eric or who aren't familiar with his work, I'll do a little introduction of you. First of all, you're a unique guest because you're the first on the revamped version of my show who has actually been a castmate of mine. So,
oh wow, I feel honored. Come through.
yeah, you can give the real tea, the real goss on me at the end.
She's a joy, everyone. She's a thrill. She's a
That's
joy.
the only reason I asked him on, to say good things about me. You found me out. Well, now I'll say a couple good things about Eric, just so we can even the score. After graduating magna cum laude, I'm gonna brag a little bit about my friend now. From Howard University, Eric performed in 2 national tours, a TheaterWorks USA tour, which I'm sure we will discuss later, and Dreamgirls at regional theaters like Ogunquit Playhouse, Playhouse in the Park, Malt's Jupiter Theater, and the Studio Theater, and at New York theaters like Ensemble Studio Theater, Metropolitan Playhouse, Ars Nova, and the acclaimed Shakespeare in the Park revival of Into the Woods, for which, I don't know if we've ever discussed this, it was my first time that I stood all day and waited to see something at Shakespeare in the Park with my camp friends. So,
oh snap!
I saw you back when.
Wow.
We'll talk about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's a regular on television shows like Only Murders in the Building, Soul Kings, and the upcoming, I have to ask you how to pronounce this because I've been seeing it in press and don't really know. Is it Girls 5 Eva?
Yes, that is the title, Girls 5. They say for short, they call it Girls 5.
Okay, great. All right. I didn't want to butcher that. Featuring Sarah Bareilles, Renee Elise Goldsberry, Busy Phillips, and many more other actors I love. And he's going to be featured in the upcoming feature film B-Boy Blues.
Yeah, B-Boy Blues, yeah.
Very exciting. That's a lot of credits.
Yo, I look back on it, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Because had you told high school me that decided to make the decision, this is what I want to do as an adult, that over the course of the first 10 years of my adult journey, that I would accumulate all of this, I would be like, wow, for real? So it never feels like much when you're doing it, but when you look back on it, I was like, goodness, wow.
Yeah, I was going to ask, because one of the reasons I asked you to come on is because I definitely think of you as the ultimate working actor. I feel like you're always working.
Oh, thank you.
And I was going to ask, does it feel that way to you, or only when it gets read out like this?
Oh, goodness. Kay, look. You aren't, my friends joke me all the time, be like, Eric stay booked. He's stay booked. I'm like, do I? Because to me, to answer your question, it feels like no. But I mean, I guess, time is, what is time anymore, especially right now, And I would say over the last handful of years, I have been fortunate enough to been able to have worked rather consistently. The on-camera situations, especially the ones that are more in the mainstream of the consummation of however we want to talk about it, but it's going to be on TV and a lot of people are going to see it. That's been fairly recent. The other smaller things, that you do for the reel, or to have the clips that your agents and managers can use just to get you out there for the larger things, those felt like things that were like, oh wow, they sound cool, cool, they want to work with me to do it, let's make it happen, because it's always, for me, do I like what it is? Do I feel like it's going to be a dope experience? If those two are checking out for me, then I'll most likely say yes, regardless of what the actual pay might be for it,
right.
Because it's all about relationships at the end of the day, I feel like. But to answer your question, it does not feel like I'm always working.
Well, that's what it looks like from the outside, but I do think that it's part of the actor experience that you on the inside feel like, God, I'm always unemployed. But to the outside viewer, it's like, wow, he's doing all this stuff.
It's the grass greener.
Exactly. Exactly. All right. Well, let's take it back to the beginning. It's interesting. You say in high school, roughly, you said you made the decision, I'm going to pursue this as a career and as a life. And I'm wondering what your first exposure to theater was, and what was that like aha moment when you were like, this is what I have to do?
Wow. Well, my first exposure actually goes back to the first grade for me. My teacher in elementary school, her name was Miss Harmon. And
Shout out to Miss Harmon.
shout out to Miss Harmon. She sparked the match in little old me. She was a lovely lady. Wherever she is now, I'm wishing her all the blessings and so much love. She decided for her class that she was going to have us put on a play. And not only was one, it was ended up being two plays. One play was Hansel and Gretel, and the other play was some I've never heard. And I think the story may be made up or some sort. It may be a children's book. I don't know. But it was called the Ugly Frog and the Beautiful Butterfly. And
I've heard of it either, but
now I knew about Hansel and Gretel. I knew about them, but I was like, Frog and the Butterfly. I still don't know where that came from. But in both of those plays, I was put in the lead. Like I was Hansel and Gretel, and I was the ugly frog in the Ugly Frog and the Beautiful Butterfly. And I have such strong, vivid, distinct memories of the day I went home with the script in my hand, particularly for Hansel and Gretel. I remember having that script at the dinner table because this was our time. Like it was me, my younger brother, my mom, and my dad. This was back when families would eat dinner, at dinner time at the table together.
yeah.
And I remember having the script right next to my plate. And my parents, I think they thought it was cute, but I was all about it. And going into like the rehearsal process, I don't remember too much about it, but I remember the showtime. And at the end of the show, we got there, and all this and all that. And it felt so grand to 6-year-old me.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my goodness, oh my God, I love this. And so it came back around with the Frog and the Butterfly play, and it was all that all over again. And so flash forward a little bit more to a fourth grade at my school, we had a players group. And that was more exposure to a larger scope because this players group did shows for the whole school. And you weren't allowed to be a part unless you were at minimum in the fourth grade. And so I auditioned my fourth grade year. I was lucky enough to get in, and that carried on to my fifth grade year as well. And so my whole elementary school experience kind of like set it off for me on a foundational level, I guess you could say, because by the time I got to middle school, I had no access to any of it. And it was kind of like snatched all away from me. Even though I had that bubble, I still wanted to do it. But by then I was starting to circulate more into music and instrumental music. And so it kind of took a turn in there. And I remember come around time to get to high school. I was getting ready to doing that whole graduation, 8th grade to 9th grade. And my home school down in Atlanta had a magnet program for math and science. And then there was another school that had a magnet program for the arts and the visual arts, performing and visual arts. And I was like, oh, I'm all about that. The visual performing arts, that's what I want. And I auditioned for that program. At the time, freshmen weren't allowed to do the musical theater specialty, but we could do it for drama. And so I got into the drama program. I think I used a poem or something because I didn't know what a monologue was. I had no clue what a monologue was, and I don't even remember where I found the poem. I just remember seeing a large selection of words pasted together.
Like, good enough. I'll read
right. Yeah. So I'm learning, and I'm gonna do it to the best of my ability. And I was fortunate enough to get into the program, and so that I would say the nail in the coffin from that whole journey from like 6 years old to 14 years old was when we did Once on This Island the fall semester of
One of
my
my favorite
freshman
shows of
year.
all time.
It holds such a special place in my heart. I can listen to the soundtrack and relive that whole thing. We went to a state one act state competition down in Georgia, and we happened to win with the show. And that whole experience, we did a one act version. I was like, oh, this is so great. I didn't even know there was a two act version until we did it again in the spring because everybody that saw it loved it so much. And so that was the nail in the coffin for me. It's like, I want to do this. I want to sing. I can sing, I can dance, I can act. It's all at the same time. And if there are more shows or experiences like this that are feeding me, like feeding my spirit, I'm like, oh gosh, well, how do I do it more? How can I get to it more? You know? And thankfully enough, my parents weren't dissuading me away from it. And I think that's something I'm very, very thankful for because I had friends who auditioned for the program and got in, but their parents were like, no, you're not doing that. And I look at them now and we're on two totally different life tracks, you know? And so it's that was for me, that was it. It's like I'm in it. This is where it's going. This is what we're doing.
So many questions based on that. I was going to say, because I know you, and as you mentioned, I mean, you do so many different genres, which I think is one of the coolest things about your career. But you are one of those actors who can do musical theater and straight theater and TV and film. But I'm wondering if there's like one, especially when it comes to that trifecta of singing, acting, dancing,
Mhm.
if there's one form of expression that has your heart, like when you're having a bad day, what do you want to be doing?
Oh gosh, that would be singing. I love to sing, but the other part of that coin, I am not a squelching high tenor. And
Mm.
so when it came down to working and being like the auditioning actor out here on the grind, one, two, being a Black man and coming from that expectation of what the business is holding for us, I was like, I don't sing like him and my voice is on the lower side. So it kind of like hit my confidence a little bit once I like got into the thick of it all. But I love to sing. I love singing. I there was a point in time where I almost ended up being in what not I was in a boy band. It was three of us. We were called Rated Next,
I did
and
not
we
know
cut.
that. Where?
I was 15 years old. 15. This is my sophomore year of high school. And it's a crazy story because the group came together over the internet. I was from Atlanta, another guy was from Houston, Texas, and another guy was from Cleveland. And back then, chat rooms were super hot. And people pop up in the chat rooms, sing on your mic. That was like an external microphone.
The
And
audio was horrible.
horrible, crazy. And we ended up vibing and we formed this group. And by some crazy notion of the universe, we culminated with the guy in Cleveland. His pastor was heavy into music as well. And he facilitated an area for us to cut a whole demo. And I remember we got I won't say we got far, but we got to a point where like we were starting to bring in like legal things, like a lawyer, entertainment lawyers, just to see where this could all go. And like it looked kind of promising, because we did a couple shows in the Cleveland area that summer before my junior year, and we won. So I was like, this could actually maybe be a thing. So I almost ended up going straight like music boy band that because by then I was so enamored with Destiny's Child and they were a huge inspiration to me, you know, and that's what that was. But then, we turned back around theater
Do you
here.
ever have regrets? Like, do you ever wish you had gone the straight up music route?
No, I don't. Because by the time we had like that summer had gone by, we cut the demo and everything, it was cool. But it was one of those things where it was like, this is cool, but how in it are we? I love the process, but the dedication and the focus, I'm not sure all of that was there for everyone involved,
Mm.
you know.
It's a crazy question to be asking 14, 15-year-olds, like, are you ready for this level of
Truly.
commitment? It's
Truly, yeah. Like I knew how I felt. And so that's part of the reason why I carried on in like theater and still continue to do music and all those other things. But I'm not sure where the other two gentlemen ended up doing. But it was a fun time for the moment it happened.
and it makes you, I happen to think all these sort of theater adjacent experiences that we
Mhm.
have do make us a better actor. I think.
Totally, totally, totally. I will say, like, even though it's not a regret, but it's more so of a thing that and I don't know. I think every now and then I'm like, maybe I should try like see how I feel about writing my own music again, because that was as far as the collective of us, I was the one writing the songs. That
Mm,
was me. I was doing that. And they were cool. They were good. Like when the family heard them, the families were like, oh, it's like, oh, this isn't just some like cutesy thing. Like y'all are all right. And so that's something I think about every now and again, now that I'm grown and have planted my feet firmly in the sand, and it's cool to see like some of our peers venture off into making music outside of, just doing theater or acting as like their own individual things. And so I think it may be something I pick back up later on, sooner or later. I don't know when, maybe whenever I feel moved, I guess you could say, because I do think about it.
yeah. It's in the cards for your future, I feel. I'm
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up the transition of coming from college into a professional career.
Mhm.
And you also brought up the expectations as a Black man in the theater industry.
Mhm.
I'm particularly wondering about, I'm sure it was a transition coming from the most famous HBCU in the nation,
Mhm.
then to, certainly I imagine in 2010 when you graduated, an extremely white theater community in New York. And I'm curious what that transition was like for you.
For me, only my personage, I am not usually one to dive deep into things that I feel like might bring me a lot of adversity.
Mm,
And so the transition from graduation into the working world wasn't necessarily difficult. Like my first professional show coming out of college was Passing Strange. And I that experience down in DC, it was the regional premiere of the show, and
that's amazing.
Stu and Heidi got a little bit involved, towards the back end of it, and it was the most amazing thing. So I was very fortunate to have that be my professional debut. And I think in so many ways that kind of made it a little easier
Mm,
once I transitioned into the even larger market here in New York City and
yeah.
seeing what that was. Because me being so fresh out of school and ready to get chomping down to the bit and all of that, I I don't think I gave myself time to process the larger scope of what the industry very much so was at that time.
Mm,
That part of it came later in my journey, because I remember by the time I got up here, that was 2011, 6 months, September 2011, I ended up getting my first production of Hair out at Co-Host Music Hall that February to start in the spring. Before that happened, though, I had already ended up booking Into the Woods as well as the Dreamgirls tour. So 2013 was a beautiful year for me.
how about telling me that you feel like you're not working all the time, because you literally just told me the year you graduated, you booked like 4 gigs in a row. So
Look, it was more like over the course of like my first 2 years out of school, I had a whole year of work lined up. It was beautiful. It was beautiful. And so like just jumping into the ocean, into the pool so suddenly, I didn't have that initial recognition of what it like was on the underbelly of it all, you
you
know?
said that that recognition came later. When would you say
Mm-hmm.
it came?
Now that I'm talking about it, I would say it wasn't too later, because the first go round with it probably not probably, did take place over the course of the 6 months of doing the Dreamgirls tour. You know, we were doing at that time, it was the most, I think, the only revival of it, even though it didn't go to Broadway, but it was directed by, you know, Robert Longbottom. And it was the one that started at the Apollo and went across the country at that time. We were doing the non-equity tour, that same production. And that, the realization, you know, you have a cast full of young Black bodies, young Black or creatives and everything. Like, even though in the show, depending on how large you want your cast to be, you can have a handful of Caucasian people in the show to do the other parts towards the beginning, the
Cadillac,
yeah, the Cadillac part. You can have that if you want.
Track in that
show. Look, you know, depending, because I remember watching there's an old bootleg of the original Broadway cast, and they had white people in their show. And I think later on, Casey Nicholaw had a few white people in his production as well, but Robert's production did not. And so having us be the face of this show, and all of our creatives are white people. And once we get on the road and things start going, you know, we get to these cities, some way more conservative than others, and here we are, a large group of young Black people. That's when the reality starts being like, oh wait, okay, cool, that's what's going on, got it. And that's just the outside world. Inside our bubble, our like creative Dreamgirls umbrella, things got like, I always call that tour the best of times and the worst of times, because as young Black, like a lot of us were under 30. We had a few that were over, but most of us were under the age of 30, and we were super young and did not know much as far as how much agency we could allow ourselves to not just hold space in this production, but like exercise it and speak up for ourselves, because we're so used to that thumb and like, and this is just some like us being actors, period, regardless of whether you're Black, white, Asian, like there's always this thing where I feel like you're being pressed upon by everyone that's higher above you, you know. And there were a few incidents where things were not okay, particularly like with different parts of management, you know, and everything. And that's when it got a little real. It got a little real on that Dreamgirls tour. Like I said, I had the best time, but it was also a time of a lot of growth and actually seeing like, oh, okay, I'm seeing how that person is being with them, even though I am like totally understanding like why like a castmate or someone who's working in a different part of the production but is Black is feeling the way they're feeling, but being received the way they're being received. You know, if I could go back being what I know now and like try to harp and just shake it all up and like make things actually not right for me, what I feel was like right, I totally would, because I feel like, you know, so many, it's not so many, but like there were some things where I was like, that wasn't okay, that wasn't right, you know, but I'm better for it.
Do you think that theater is changing at all in that way, both because of the conversations that everyone thankfully was having surrounding race and inclusion this summer?
Yeah.
But also, well, I guess I'm curious just on that, whether you think that it will actually change or whether you think it's sort of hot air while we were all unemployed.
You know, that makes me think back when we were in the thick of all this and we were fresh off of the murder of George Floyd, and our legends in, I mean, they're legends in the theater at large, but because they're Black, a lot of us are Black performers, we hold them like to that status even more so. People like LaShawns, Audra, Billy, Brian Stokes Mitchell, the whole gamut. When I saw that they were getting together, and you know, there was a lot of internal dialogue as to things that could happen if no real change was made, I was like, oh, wow, well, things may actually change, because after so long, you know, of once we get past like 2016 and things start happening in our previous president's administration and they bleed into other aspects of life, particularly entertainment, and we start seeing data and numbers and things like that come out, and it all starts to grow. By the time we got to this past summer, it all felt so skeptical. If there was any mention of any sort of trying to be inclusive or diversifying, it didn't feel real. It felt like, just a bunch of lip talk. There's a part of me that still is a little like, y'all just playing. Y'all just playing. Like, just like stop playing in our face and say like you're just being performative. But I so want to be proven wrong. I hope and pray that I am, because it's long overdue. And I say this like not just for people who are like Black, who are like me, but for all, so like everyone deserves their bit of representation, and we can no longer, I feel like it's no longer, um what's the word, it's no longer useful to tout or put on the table diversity. It needs to be equity.
Yeah.
Because it can't be cosmetic. Nothing going forward as far as changing this part of where we are in our business, it can't be cosmetic. It has to be on the foundation. It has to be in the roots. Otherwise, it's still going to be more of the same. And we'll find ourselves back here again. And I don't think any of us want that.
No, it was such a weird time in some ways to be having these conversations, I feel,
Yeah.
because everything was hypothetical, because no theater was
Exactly.
happening. So
Exactly.
it was very easy to be like, we're going to commit to all these things, but
Uh-huh.
the proof will be in the pudding, as they say, once theater restarts.
Totally.
I'm curious if you think too, just more broadly post-pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
as sort of the consummate working actor, do you think any of the ways that we do theater in general are going to change post-pandemic?
I think they may change a little bit, but I don't see them changing a lot. At most, I think more people who are producing theater and our theater makers, particularly here in New York City. I'm not sure so much about our regional colleagues, but here in the city, I think there'll be more conversation of people adding in a digital element
Yeah.
into what it is that they plan to do. I think we may see more of that. I don't know for sure, but if I had to guess, that would be my top guess. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if, like, and it'll be cool, like, because we know the public is about to do Shakespeare in the Park this summer. They've announced it.
Yeah.
It will be cool if they find some kind of way to broadcast those live performances to an at-home audience, that whether people who want to watch online have to enter a digital lottery and that's how they can watch, or if they're here in the city and they want to show up and do how we used to do because they miss it so much, and stand out in that line and get a ticket. It will be interesting to see if that's what they end up doing, because I think because theater has been what it's been for so long, I think change is necessary in order for it to grow and to become something even more than what we used to have it be. And so that's what I feel like. I think they
That's
need to edit
exciting. That's a good answer. Mostly what people, when I've had discussions with people about, like, do you think the way theater is fundamentally made is going to change, they've all said that they think that, like, auditions and even some early rehearsals will continue to be on Zoom to save money. And I really don't, I really hope that doesn't happen. So I'm much happier with your answer.
Oof. No, I hope so too. But if I know anything, where people can save a dollar, they will.
Yes. I mean, you can't really blame them in this industry where
No,
unfortunately we don't have any federal support of any kind,
exactly.
which the pandemic has also laid bare, but agreed.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask, too, given how we're talking about all these changes, um, and earlier you and I were talking about about TikTok, and
Mhm.
I feel like so many of these conversations that everyone is having right now to have taken place on social media.
Yep.
So I'm curious for your take on social media and whether you think it's like necessary for a young actor to have.
Necessary in 2021, I lean more towards yes than no, because I think about it this way. If I decide to really lock in and start doing my own thing, and I'm looking for people who I want to work with, it doesn't help me if I have this like I think this person is amazing, they're super talented, and you know they're doing all the things that I want, but I'm just now meeting them.
Yeah.
And it will be cool to be able to find out more information beyond an audition and a conversation. And not to say that I'm going to be going to your social media to try to like find things out, like, oh, you like, is it salacious? Is it, you know, like that's not the MO.
Something.
And I don't right. And I don't think that's the MO for anyone. But I do think if there is a way that you can allow for people who want not only want to work with you but who want to support you,
Yeah.
you know, if there's a way that they can do that beyond showing up to the show that you're doing, or you know what it is with, like if it has to be in person or something like that, I think it only helps you.
Especially as we're coming on this era, I think where actors can do lots of different things and show off their individuality. I think probably social media, as you say, is the way to do that, to be like, oh, casting director, look at this other cool thing that I do. Like
Yeah,
you can be
yeah.
like, look at this boy band that I'm in.
Absolutely. You know, I feel like it will change and become this like amoeba of things the farther along you get in your career, you know?
Yeah.
Because, you know, there are people, if like Beyonce doesn't have to have a social media situation if she does not want to, because she is Beyonce.
I
Now
did
you're like,
you were wearing Ivy Park today and I loved it.
she doesn't need any social media if she does not want to, you know, but because she does, it only allows her to be it only allows her reach to reach more people and for people to, you know, take part in her message and all of that. I think it only helps. And like consume it and use it however so is healthy for you. But
Yeah.
I do think a presence is more necessary than it isn't. That's my opinion.
But it's interesting too that we're talking about social media, because when I was like doing a little research on your career,
Mhm.
I felt like you, especially in TV and film, but also on stage, have done a ton of period work, specifically in like the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
I'm curious, A, what that has been like, and B, if you have a sense of why you think we as a culture we keep returning to that era, especially in like theater and music.
Right. Oof, Lord. You know, well, for me, it's definitely been fun. Like especially doing a show like Hair twice. You know, that's the one that immediately pops out for
Is
me.
that your costume rendering in the
It
background?
is right there. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
Shane.
the
Shout out to Shane.
yes. You know, I told Shane, I was like, I'm keeping this and putting it on my wall. And there it is.
They were the
Right
most
there.
beautiful costume renderings I've ever seen in any.
Truly. I was like, can all of the designers I work with do their renderings like this? Because this is dope.
Yeah, and your costume was amazing.
I love this so much. So much. But you know, with Hair being the show that I've done a couple times now,
How many
that
times have you done it now, or only twice?
it's only been twice. I've auditioned for it more times than that, but it's only been twice.
I
I
should
feel
say, I
like
haven't said yet, Eric and I were in a production of Hair together.
there we go.
There you
Yes. Yes. Uh-huh. Chrissy there. Chrissy right here. For me, it's been fun. It's been fun, but you know, it's always different depending on who's at the helm. Because the first time I did it, our director was a wonderful woman by the name of Janie Wallace. She has a beautiful family right now. I'm not sure if she's still on her directing tip, but I hope she comes back because I think she's brilliant. And our production kind of was a mirror a little bit of the Broadway revival. And I loved that production all the ways around and through. Like
go. Perfect revival.
perfect. Oh, I loved it so much. And so when we got to rehearsal and we started digging into all the things, I was like, oh wow, this is dope. So it's always been fun. Even when we got to our production, it was always fun and super interesting to find out new things, because the newness for me when we got to our production was I remember Daisy had those panel boards off to the side and
Oh
had
yeah.
all that info on there. I was like, oh wow, a lot of that I did not know. And I found it to be even more enriching to what we were putting up on the stage and what we wanted to create, you know? But on the other side, where it was super fun, it was also um, very enlightening as to, even though we've come so far, there's still so much that has not changed, you know?
Yeah.
has not changed. And it's so doggone strange. It's where we are now. With now we're having to say hashtag stop Asian hate. And I think on how, you know, hair and that whole act two, like could you imagine an alternate version of what that could have been? Like had the a different composer and like team had come together to create something like totally even more outrageous than what that acid trip is for Claude, you know? And it just goes to that. The farther we go along, the more things are like are not changing.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's part of why we be always going back to revisit those things. But I feel like there's only so much preaching to the choir that we can do, because obviously the people that are coming to these shows, you know, that most times they're familiar with what they are, and you know they're going for nostalgic reasons or anything, you know, close to like, oh, I used to love this song, or oh, I remember that person did the show back then and I loved it so much, so I want to see it again, just to relive what you know and what you hold dear. But I think it's helpful to go beyond that and to dig into the message of what it is that we're trying to say and convey, to apply it to today, so we don't have to like still be like, oh, why are we still here? Why?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think I think you're totally right that we as a society keep doing like shows in the 60s because we can be like giving ourselves a pat on the back, being like,
Mm-hmm.
we surmounted those issues.
Like, did we
And
though?
it's probably not the case, but I guess it'll be fascinating to see if the conversations that happened and the protests that happened after 2020, if it changes anything, whether we will keep returning to these 60s and 70s period pieces
Right. You know,
the same
because
way.
I even think about doing ragtime at Ogunquit and knowing the story of ragtime. It's we it was a story we've seen all summer last year. You
Yeah,
know that we it's in ragtime takes place in the early 1900s. You know, sure, like we love the music. We all love like I would sit up on a stage and cradle a baby if they would let me sing Your Daddy's Son. All right, we all want to do it, but beyond that, you know, the deeper messaging, it has to mean something. It has to influence us in a way where we grow as like a human race, as a humanity, as a person, as a whoever you are that you identify as. It has to be there, I feel like.
yeah. It's also interesting because I feel like people don't think of musical theater as being like an agent of change in society. Do you think it can be? Do you think it
I
is?
feel like it absolutely is, because if I feel music is a universal language. I can listen to other countries' music and not understand a word of what's being said, but the feeling is there. I can always dig for more information, like go find what those lyrics mean, or like watch a visual, but the feeling will always be there. And I know how it makes me feel. And I feel with music being that, I don't think there's a way how musical theater cannot be an agent of change, because it's using that very tool, you know, and whether that message or whatever that might be that's in the material, that might be different or up for debate. But because I feel like the not the veneer, but the intention of music being placed upon this thought at large of this show, there's something in there that is going to touch a little bit deeper than had it maybe have just been some words said as they are usually said in everyday life, you know? Because I mean, there's a reason why, you know, we go to school and they say, oh, like you have to sing, you can't talk anymore, you got to sing it. I think there's a reason for that. And this, I feel like it's the reason why we love, you know, like, especially growing up, like those of us who are heavy into the Disney movies and like fall in love with those first introductions of what we understand musicals to be. There's a reason why we're so drawn to it, you know, because the moments that those things live in, they're speaking to a soul spot in us, and like they stir us and move us. And so even though we're watching a cartoon talking about being in love or like wanting to go be a part of the human world because you don't want to swim anymore or something like that, it's like, damn, like, oh, I be relatable. I relate too, because now I want to go do that, but I'm stuck here, but I know I can because I got it in me, you know?
Yeah, I think even when it's funny you mentioned that, even when we're kids and we don't even understand the lyrics as you're
Yeah.
saying, it it gets you on a gut, on a soul level, as
Yes.
you're saying. So I mean, I completely agree, obviously, as a big musical theater proponent myself. On that happy note,
Hmm.
I always like to end with a segment I call the Thank You Five segment, which is 5 rapid fire questions I
Ooh.
ask you, and you have to answer with just the first thing that comes to the top of your head. You obviously, I have not pre-cleared these questions, so if you don't want to answer it, you don't have to. But I
Okay,
think
cool,
it'll
cool,
be fun.
cool.
Favorite role you've ever played?
Favorite role ever played? Youth, Passing Strange.
Amazing. I love that show.
So much.
People don't do it enough. Um, Best story about doing Into the Woods in the park.
Meryl Streep came. We got the Streep in the audience. She came backstage. All of us were at a loss for words. And this is something I hold dear. By the time we were getting around with our introduction, because she was hanging out in Amy's dressing room, she was hanging out over there by that end of the bleachers. And my other two non-ex castmates at the time, they introduced them. I'm getting to her. I'm like, "Hi, my name is Eric. I'm here. Thank you so much for coming." She's like, "Oh, you were fantastic." And I was like, Meryl Streep said I was fantastic. Came
Wow.
out to tell me nothing.
That is a great story. I didn't even know, I guess, when we worked together that you had been in it. And I so clearly, because it came out the summer before I went to college.
Okay.
And I remember seeing it and being like on the cusp, but you know, that summer before you like leave
Uh-huh.
home, feeling on the
Yeah.
cusp of everything. I
Yeah.
loved it so much. Was it as fun to, this is not part of the Thank You
Yes.
Five. I'm now going on a tangent. Was it as fun to work on as it seemed, or
Oh, totally. Absolutely. Absolutely. From day one, it was a total dream. Like it was a summer filled with magic. It was a magical summer from the rehearsal room to the Delacorte stage.
okay, this question is built on some Instagram sleuthing that I did on you.
Ah,
And I actually wanted to know this question.
yeah.
How do you know Orphe and what's your favorite thing about her?
Orphe, that's my Jessica right there. Okay, so I know Orphe through a workshop we did together. We were on a workshop contract for about 2.5, 3 weeks or something like that. And that became one of my good Judies up in that show. The musical that we were working on was called Bliss, the musical. I think they're still trying to make it happen here in the city. Hopefully they do. It's a very cute show. You got 4 princess sisters and their king, widowed father, who's like, "No, don't do that." But they're all like, "No, we want to do this, Dad." And they're all so distinctly different. It's such a girl power show. It's lovely. But yeah, I call Orphe Jessica because there was one situation where we were waiting to do a presentation, and someone who worked on management, we could not remember her name. We would both call, like, I think either she or I called her the wrong name one time, and it had the name that we called her was Jessica. And it was, at some point she was like, "That's not my name, it's this." And we're like, "Oh, okay, thank you so much." And so that's our thing, and like we bonded beyond that, like on fashion things and stuff like that. And I adore her so very much. And funny enough, I used to warm up to her tracks from Legally Blonde. I don't think I told her that, but
There is that moment when you meet, like when you work with a sort of theater famous person for the
uh-huh.
first time and you can't like reveal how much of a fan you are yet. And then
Right.
you become friends and the rest
Yes,
is great.
that's my girl right there.
That's also such a testament to both you and also the theater process that you can make friends that kind of last, that you feel close
Yeah.
to from a 2.5 week workshop. Because I've had
Yeah.
experiences like that.
Yeah. Like, when you connect, you connect. And you don't fight it.
And it's not like a regular job. Like you and I only were doing a show together for 2 months, was it?
Yeah,
Two and
yeah.
a half
We're about
months.
8, 9 weeks. Yeah.
But I think working for 8 weeks at a regular job, you'd kind of know the person. But now I feel like I know you incredibly well, and
Oh,
that'll
absolutely.
probably change.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Sorry. I keep going on tangents.
We love tangents. I love them. I don't know about your viewers, but I do.
Worst self-tape you made in quarantine.
In quarantine.
You don't have to say what it was for, but just sort of
Uh-huh.
the vibe and what made it sort of embarrassing.
Woof. You know, I preface it with this because I don't send anything off that I am not happy with.
That's good.
That I don't do. But going back, actually, I take it back. There was a production that and this was during quarantine, but it was during the part of quarantine where we thought we were going to be getting back in the summer. And that did not happen. A little cabaret production of a show using a very famous woman's music tied to a very famous movie. And I was called in for a particular part that wanted me to be an amalgamation of a very famous performer as well as a very famous pop culture icon in the LGBTQ community. And that audition, I was like, oh Lord, this is strange, but I'm gonna do it anyway, just to get it out of the way because I do it. The concept is cute. I can ride with it. I like if I had to do this a few times out the week, I would not mind. But going back to what we were talking about earlier, like it didn't help that the line for this was the one and only Michael Kilgore. It did not help. Didn't help me at all. So I was like, I hope they ain't expecting me to sing like that. But I did the tape and I sent it off. I'll mark that as my worst, only because of the situation.
I'm sure it was still good, but it is always funny as an actor to like get music for an audition or a tape or something and be like, oh, they think that's my range? Cool.
That part.
My last of the thank you 5, any dream collaborators you want to work with?
Collaborators, wow. We're talking, we limited to saying in the theater world, that's what we're doing?
Yeah, but it could be like a playwright, a composer, or an actor, a director.
Got you. Dream collab, I'll have to say Liesl Tommy. She is a Black woman from South Africa. She directed Eclipse on Broadway back in 2015. And she did some things at the Public as well. And now she's gone on to directing movies, getting them big dollars. She has the upcoming Aretha Franklin biopic, Respect, with Jennifer Hudson. She directed that. Wow. She would be a dream collaborator. And I say that because I don't know her personally. I've never met her. But I have friends who have worked with her and who are friends with her. And through them, they speak so highly of her and how she is as an artist and as a person. And those things I hear sound like gold to me. And like even the way I'm talking, describing her, like she feels like the type of person who would not only give you gems to walk with while you're doing whatever it is you're working with, but beyond that into life. And it's those types of people who I love working with. I can say like she's leading me to someone else, being Felicia Rashad. She's another one. So I know I gave you 2, and we answered 1, but I gave you 2.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. Is there anything you feel that I've missed in our theater discussion or in your career that you want to talk about in particular?
Oh gosh, well, no, this was great. I've never done anything like this before, but just to give people a little more context as to how things have been for me during this time in the pandemic, because I know there's so many of us who are like auditions are hardly far few in between, if any, for some of us, and I feel that to a core. Just know, because I have been fortunate enough to be on some sets, during this pandemic, and working on camera has always been a goal of mine. For real, if I'm being like honest, it's what I wanted to do before I got into theater, but theater happened first. And so like, now that I'm here, I'm like, okay, cool. Yes. But, being able to work with Renee Lee's Goldsberry and Sarah Bareilles and Girls 5, as well as Selena Gomez and Only Murders in the Building, and being directed by Jussie and working with Brandy Evans, who's a regular on P-Valley on Stars, being able to be in those spaces and watching how all the parts move as well as the people's process, you know, like especially when it's people who you've seen from afar and mine is what it is they do. I have enjoyed that so much. But I think I just want to leave people with just know that things are turning and it can happen because it happened for me and I know it can happen for anybody else. And so it's an exciting time, even though it feels super bleak, but things are getting better. And if anybody's watching, feel like, oh my gosh, there's no work, there's no this, I'm not getting auditions or whatever. I would say reframe it for however it is you need to reframe it for it to feel healthy because it's only the story that you're telling yourself. I had to change my story to get to what I'm doing, especially in this pandemic. Like Katie, I'll tell you, I told myself my breakthrough is on the other side of this pandemic, and my breakthrough is what I have walked into. And so it's totally possible. You just got to change your story.
It's powerful. I totally agree. On that note too, I'm wondering just before we go, do you have any advice for aspiring actors, aspiring singers, people who want to carve a sort of similar path and career that you did?
Oh yeah, my advice would be to if you know in your heart of hearts that this is what you want to do, lean into it and persist because they can't keep you out the game forever. They cannot keep, like RuPaul says, you can't keep a good girl down. I can't keep a good queen down, whatever he says. Because like at some point, it's gonna fall in your favor. And I think as long as you're doing, you know, work that feels good to you, you know, whether if it's an audition or a reading or whatever, so whatever it might be, it's all adding up to that place where you want to be eventually, or however so long down the road it might turn up for you. And so my advice would be to lean into it and persist because the only way you lose if you take yourself out the game. But just know it's going to be sacrifice. There's going to be a lot of sacrifice, you know, on the other side. But it all pays off.
I think you're a perfect example even of what you're saying, because even as we were talking, like you really pounded the pavement and paid your dues per se. You were in non-equity productions long before you earned your equity card. And I think you're in SAG now, right?
I joined SAG this past November.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a big milestone too. And you similarly said, like, I want to do television and film work, and then worked hard and made it happen for yourself. So I think you're a really good example of persisting, as you say, and just working hard.
It can happen. Like I said, I'll be 10 years on my professional journey this September. So, you know, like it can happen. And that's just been my story. It's been quicker for other people. It's been longer for other people. But the thing that's been consistent, whoever it is, they stayed in.
Totally. And I think our framing of like quicker or longer, we sort of have to get over as actors and just tell ourselves, I have to keep doing what I'm doing, and things are going to happen when they're going to happen.
Right. Because like, I think about even with you doing this show, who knows where something like this could lead to?
I feel like the pandemic has been a time where for me, a lot of other parts of myself have opened up. Absolutely. And ways for me to still be an actor and present myself as an actor, but who also does these other things. Absolutely. I feel like in the past that wasn't as accepted. You had to be like, I'm an actor only.
Right.
So even you could go back to your boy band at this rate.
It wouldn't be that. I'll be solo, but it's on the plate.
Band at this point too.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Eric. Please tune in next Thursday. We have a really exciting slate of other guests for great conversations. Like and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.